Some things are all around us and we don't even know it. Air, unless it moves. Pain, unless it's ours. Mental health challenges, unless we're attuned. Be one who knows about mental health disorders, destigmatizes them, makes and is the difference.
Addiction. It's still a word filled with stigma and misunderstanding. Inaccurate portrayals in movies have blinded our eyes to see that an addiction can happen in anyone's life. Overwhelming stress, unresolved trauma, including childhood trauma, and many other factors can lead us to practice behaviors or consume harmful substances to temporarily numb our pain. But there is hope for a lasting freedom. Adventist Recovery Ministries can help you find the path to life. Join a journey group to experience a Christ-centered 12-step program. Be trained as a facilitator to host a group in your church or community. You can also be trained as a sponsor or equip your church to be a trauma resource center. You can be someone's hope for freedom.
Life is challenging. Figuring out who you are, what you want, and how to get there, there's no instruction manual. Questions swirl in your mind, and you're not sure where to turn. A Rugged Journey is a safe place to ask your toughest questions. You can ask us anything, anonymously, and find solid advice on relationships, anxiety, addiction, self-worth, whatever you're struggling with. Our mentors are ordinary people, willing to join you on your journey in a compassionate and respectful way. The road can be long, but you don't have to walk it alone. A Rugged Journey.
Have you ever felt like you were nearing the point of being overwhelmed? Who hasn't experienced the feeling of burnout? From that place of being overwhelmed, have you felt there was nowhere to turn? As humans, we are very good at hiding the reality that at times we are way too close to our breaking point. In the midst of our overwhelm, we may even receive compliments that we've never seemed stronger, when in fact we really feel like we are breaking. What if there was a safe space where you could bring your brokenness and experience healing? Coming soon, you can engage in 12-step style groups to avoid succumbing to burnout. Be on fire, avoid the burnout. Be not consumed.
Anxiety, relationships, addiction, self-worth. Where do you turn for answers to life's challenges? Gorgeous to God is a safe space for young women to ask their toughest questions and find their deepest purpose. Our mentors are ordinary people willing to journey with you in a compassionate and respectful way. You are loved. You are seen. You are gorgeous to God.
Most of us know where to go when our bodies are broken, but do we know where to go when our hearts are broken because of loss? At some point in our lives, we all experience the pain of loss and are in need of heart healing. When we lose someone or something important in our lives, it hurts. The hurt is called grief, and it calls out for relief, for comfort and some type of help. Where can we go? Where would you go? Health experts are predicting a pandemic wave of prolonged grief in the aftermath of COVID-19. We can be present for each other in both our joys and our sorrows. It takes a careful and understanding approach. Grief support groups can help. Your community, both in and out of your local church, is hurting. Watch for resources coming soon to help you more effectively lead others through the seasons of their grief. The mission of the Adventist Learning Community is to empower people with the passion and skills necessary to further the kingdom of Christ in the 21st century. Because of technology, we can put training, education, and resources into the palms of people's hands anywhere and anytime. Whether you're a pastor, teacher, church administrator, believer, or Christ seeker, you'll be able to find free courses that you can take for continuing education credit, certification, or just for fun. Our portfolio will help you manage and keep track of your continuing education units for pastors, teachers, and administrators, as well as student learning outcomes for pastoral interns. Our ministerial and educational library puts Adventist resources from around the world at your fingertips. Watch a video, read an article, and share what you find with others. Browse and connect with Adventist teachers that are looking to partner and create academic and faith-based learning projects. Search for project ideas that address real-world problems and create a solution. Follow the steps to guide your class through project-based learning and empower your students to take an active role in learning. Then, share your results. Explore our course catalog and see if there's a faith-based course you'd like to take or a resource you could use in your ministry or devotional life.
Diane Cantu tells the story of a senior reporter at a national magazine who was the quintessential newsman, full of curiosity, life, and a dry sense of humor, all while mentoring cub reporters and churning out cover stories with speed and elegance. But he was also a quintessential survivor. He endured an environment often hostile to talent. He lost his best friends and closest colleagues through 3 major changes in leadership: a child to a terrible traffic accident, and his 2 other children to incurable illnesses. Yet, he milled around the newsroom, aiding struggling young interns and sharing his excitement for his future. This is a picture of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from extremely difficult situations and experience personal growth in the process. Resilience may sound like a superpower, but in actuality, research shows that resilience is ordinary, not extraordinary. This newsman could have reacted very differently. We have all seen a father unable to regain his confidence after a layoff at work, or a friend persistently depressed after a painful divorce, deciding to just take a few years off from life. Resilience is that tiny seed inside everyday people to keep getting up when life knocks us down. Like a mustard seed, it may be small in its beginning, but with the right elements can become larger than all the other skills we develop. 4 main elements influence the growth of the tiny seed of resilience: relationships, wellness, purpose, and hope. The first element is relationships. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2 tells us that Jesus endured the cross and despised the shame for the joy that was set before him. The joy of healing humanity's relationship with God and within itself. His love for God and others made him resilient in the darkest moments of his earthly life. The second element is wellness. Wellness isn't about surviving, but thriving. In other words, wellness consists of making an intentional effort to enhance who we are as a whole by focusing on our physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, and social well-being. In John chapter 10 and verse 10, Jesus tells us that he came to give us an abundant life. Proper habits of self-care increase our resilience in moments of struggle to press forward. The third element is purpose. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 10 that we are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus for good works. It was Friedrich Nietzsche who said, "If you know why, you can bear any how." Purpose gives us the why so we can bear the blows of tragedy. But purpose also teaches us that looking beyond our pain and providing a balm to the wounds of others increases our resilience. The final element is hope. Romans chapter 15, verse 13 calls God the God of hope and reveals his desire that we abound in hope. Hope pushes us past our sufferings by empowering us to focus not on that which is, but on that which is to come. In Proverbs 24, verse 16, Solomon made the case that more than education, more than experience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. That's true in the cancer ward, it's true in the Olympics, it's true in the boardroom, and it's true in our spiritual walk. No matter what has you down, keep getting up by building a relationship with God and those around you, by enhancing your well-being, by finding purpose and rising out of the ashes of tragedy and helping others do the same, and by looking at life through the lens of hope and knowing that suffering will one day give way to joy.
Hello and welcome back to the Restored Mental Health and Wellness Summit. We are here at our final plenary session for this phase, the educational portion of our summit, and I'm really excited to be with you and to have our conversation for today. Now, before we get there, I want to just give a quick comment about that video we just finished watching about resilience. I hope you've enjoyed and appreciated them as much as I have. We have actually developed a series of those videos that are available for you to use in your church, in your community, wherever you see a opportunity to share those videos. And we have them available in both English and Spanish. So we'll send out information about how to access those videos in the future. I also want to remind you that, as I said, the program is not ending today. We have our evening program starting tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then we have programming going through tomorrow afternoon, and then of course all day Sunday. Those of you who are registered for the event, you will receive an email, or you may have received it already today, with information about that. Those of you who are joining us on the live stream, we hope that you can join us this Friday evening for our program as well. So throughout these past couple of days, we have covered a lot of ground regarding a variety of topics related to mental health and wellness during our plenary sessions. And we started by laying a foundation about understanding why faith communities have an important role to play in addressing the current mental health crisis. We also talked about how it's important that we link our healthcare practitioners along with those faith communities to work together in partnership. We've looked at the evidence behind the holistic approach to addressing mental health needs, and we've also considered some of those very challenging issues surrounding this, including discrimination, racism, and even how our political landscape can influence mental health inequities. And so these are all difficult topics to address at times, but they're important that we address them, and we address them together so that we can find solutions that work for our communities. Well, this afternoon, we are going to have a few presenters who are going to now bring it all together and make this practical for us. How can we begin to make a difference in our communities? How can we, through resources that are available already, through looking at partnership opportunities, and also by considering creative ways to address mental health needs? And so I'm very excited to introduce the first of our two presenters. We're going to begin with Dr. Carla Gober-Park. She is currently serving as Executive Director for Wholeness and Faith Strategy and Mission and Ministry at the Corporate Office of Advent Health. She has been with Advent Health since 2019, where she also serves as assistant to the president for mission. Previously to this, she served as assistant vice president for spiritual life at Loma Linda University Health and was the director of a Center for Whole Person Care. She was associate professor in both the School of Medicine and the School of Religion at Loma Linda, teaching whole person care to medical students. She has also mentored residents and physicians in whole person care. Currently at Advent Health, she works at the intersection of hospital-church community. Her primary interest in this capacity is to develop healthy ecosystems using business, healthcare, community, wellness, and church models to inform that. Following Dr. Park, we will have Angel Easton, who is Digital Projects Supervisor at Adventist Information Ministry, or AIM. She has worked with AIM for over 7 years in various roles and currently oversees all of AIM's digital projects. She helps ministries, churches, and various departments here at the North American Division and various initiatives to reach their goals for connection and evangelism in the digital space. So we are going to hear now from Dr. Park and Angel Easton.
When we're talking about mental health issues, we're not just talking about the individual. We're talking about a complex collaboration between many entities. So the goals and objectives for this presentation are threefold. One is to understand that complexity, to understand that mental health is actually related to where people are born, where they're located, their history, their culture, to understand that a map could actually help us understand those people better. And finally, to explore the potential that faith communities or churches have in helping us address mental health issues. And so when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about getting the conferences involved, getting the churches involved, getting communities involved, and getting hospitals involved. And so before we start looking at mental health issues here at Advent Health, we ask how we could prepare ourselves. We have 51 hospitals in 9 states, and we began monthly meetings with all of our mission leaders and our community benefits leaders, inviting conference liaisons. And we first gathered around a book written by Dr. Calvin Rock so that we could understand how the state and regional SDA conferences work together. And we then also developed a church list. We found out that we have 10,000 Protestant churches in the zip codes where our hospitals exist. So we're like, we can't start working with faith communities until we understand who and where those faith communities are. Then we developed a map that would help us better understand that. And then we asked all the hospitals to develop their own strategic plan with how to work with faith communities. We called that the accountability of 2021. So in that accountability, each market developed their own strategy for how they worked with their faith communities. So once they developed their goals and their metrics, they put them on a form that you see in front of you. You can't really read it, but you'll see on the far left, they identified their goals, and the metrics are in the next column. So that is so that they could know exactly what they were going to do for the next year in relation to these faith communities. We gathered all of those strategies together, and then we began working with the local conferences so that they can understand what we were expecting of ourselves. We identified liaisons to work with from those local conferences, and then we began to develop deeper relationships and strategies in relation to the conferences. Then we began looking at the communities themselves, asking ourselves, what are their needs, which are gathered by the CHNA, the Community Health Needs Assessment, which every hospital has to gather in relation to the communities that they serve. And so as we began looking at these needs, we also wanted to look at what strengths these communities brought with them and what resources they had that we could connect with. But we also thought that the most important thing was looking at those communities in terms of relationships and people that we could connect with to help work together in meeting mental health needs. What was interesting, we discovered through the CHNA that mental health was one of the highest priorities in most of our markets. Then we began working with the local church. And yet, you have to ask yourself, just how much can a local church actually do? That's what is really surprising when you get down to the local church level. So I'm going to talk about the story of one church, Mars Hill. It's a church that I've come to love very much. And it's in the city of Sanford in Florida. And it has a very interesting history and current culture. So the history of this little church, or this Sanford actually, is that it early on in its history had what we might call color lines, where the workers were often African American, and they were relegated to certain areas within the city. What's interesting is that those color lines, while they would appear to be invisible, no one talks about those color lines anymore, but I have walked those lines, those streets that marked that outline, and the color lines still exist. So what we think is a modern culture actually has historical roots that help determine and affect what kind of struggles a population has today. So that's why those struggles, those challenges, as well as the resources start appearing in those CHNAs as we start making those assessments. Those struggles go way back for years. Then we began to review the GIS map, which I'm going to show you in a minute, for what the specific needs might be around this little church called Mars Hill. We looked at the immediate community. We turned to the conference for support and collaboration. And then we looked at the hospital and asked what we could do, what resources we could bring. And then finally, we looked at the history of this little church. They are a mighty church, but they only have, at present, 35 members. So I was shocked because I was introduced to this church through what they were doing in the community. So all these people were turning out from this little church to help their community. But when I was invited to preach at the church and showed up to preach on a particular Sabbath, I was actually amazed at how tiny the little church is. And I began asking questions of how could this little church be doing so much in its community? So let's back up and look at the GIS map. This is what the dashboard looks like for this map. And so you see our hospitals on this map. It's hard to tell here, but there are 51 little H's on that map. And if you look around the dashboard, you'll see to the left the CHNA. So all of our churches that we work with can click there and find out what the needs are in their local community. And that's where the hospital provides a resource that they can learn about their community through this dashboard. Then you see the average unemployment rate on the left in green. You see the number of mental health providers in their area on the lower left. Then on the right, lower, you see a circle that talks about the population breakdown by race. So that you see, if we look at this entire map, you see what the largest population there is mostly what we would call the white Caucasian population. And then as you go up on the right side of the dashboard, you see the amount of diabetes, the average heart disease, the mental health issues, and average obesity, percent obesity. As we zero in on this map, we're going to get closer to our little Mars Hill Church. This is all the hospitals in Florida. And you see that already the population by race is changing. All the other indicators on the map are changing. But as we move in closer to Mars Hill, which is in the, you can't see it from where you're standing, and I can hardly see it, but it's a little green dot up by the lake there on the top of the map. So now you see that the population by race has gone to a more black population. That's what's represented by the blue in the wheel at the bottom right. You see that the adult diabetes has gone up, the percent obesity has gone up, and mental health issues have all gone up in this little area. Now, we're not going to do this here now, but if they wanted to, they could actually click and find out from this map what is going on in the actual blocks or the mile around the Mars Hill Church. So this map has many layers behind it that will help this little church and those of us working with it know what the strengths and challenges are in the area around this little church. Now we're going to talk about community resource spots. So Mars Hill decided that it wanted to be a community resource spot. Now, what does that mean? This is the most astounding part of this whole story, is this little church decides that it wants to provide those 6 things that you see on the screen right now. It wants to provide food. It wants to provide job opportunities for the people that would come and learn from them. It wants to provide care coordination or health screenings through the health department. It wants to provide education. It wants to provide mental health first aid. And it wants to provide a mobile health unit. Now, this is interesting because if you look at the little paragraph before these 6 things, you'll see that this is located in an underserved community identified by the CHNA, and it is trying to be a presence within its community, even though the church itself has people within it who actually need the services that that little church is going to provide. So I want to say that again. That as you come on a Thursday and you see the cars lined up to get food, one of those might be the parishioners in that very church. That's unbelievable. That this little church that is trying to serve its community also has people within it who need the services that that church wants to provide. And you think, well, how did that happen? Why isn't it a wealthy church down the road who has said, we have a lot of resources, we want to come in and help this underserved community? Why is it this little church that has needs itself that decides it wants to help provide for its own community? Maybe it's because those who have felt the pinch of poverty want to help the poor. Those who have felt the pinch of not having enough food want to feed. Those who have felt the pinch of not knowing whether they're going to get through their next paycheck want to help provide resources for other people. Those who have felt need want to meet needs. And that's what Jesus was trying to say. It is an upside down kingdom. That the real leaders in this kingdom that is present on this earth are those who have felt the need for something larger, something deeper, something broader. And those who have felt that need are the ones who are able in their own lives to find the time to give it, the resources to give it, the resources to be there for other people. And so you have this little church of very few people breaking their backs to try to serve the people around them. I'd like to show a film now of that little church. It's just a little 3-minute film where we interviewed those who are actually providing these services, and we interviewed these people just a couple of weeks ago. So this is a very fresh film on what is happening now with that community resource spot.
Morning. We want to welcome everyone. The Lord is going to bless us tremendously today as we continue to do His work. Oh, Heavenly Father, who art in heaven, again, Lord, we thank You for Your blessing. Let us not realize that what we are doing for those outside there, we are doing it for Jesus. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
Okay. I'm going to give you an extra strawberry.
These are my grandbaby.
I know you have a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
My grandbaby, he loves strawberries.
Okay.
We come every week. We serve anywhere between 180 some people on a regular day, and sometimes we go over 200, and we're here every Thursday. On every fourth Thursday of the month, SALT is here. The Muslim Mobile Medical Clinic is here.
The other thing we're grateful for is that Advent bringing in the medical mobile where people can come and get help. Some people don't have a doctor to go to, or they don't have insurance, and they need medical care.
We're here to do what our mission says, extend the healing ministry of Christ and help the community in any way, shape, or form that we can.
All right, let me see your finger.
We're a small church.
And we have like 35 people maybe in attendance.
No.
Maybe. Yeah.
But we have a handful of dedicated folk.
They come in and out every week as much as, possible.
So we know people out there who need the help, and we're glad that we have the opportunity to offer that to people who needs it.
Yeah, so one of the biggest reasons why I come every week to help and decide to be a part of community service is because I understand what it's like to be in need. And I've been homeless twice in my lifetime, once when I was on my own and once when I had kids. And especially when you have children and you don't know where, you have so many different things. You're trying to figure out how to keep a roof over their head, and you're trying to figure out, where their clothes are coming from. Having somewhere at least where you know where their food's coming from. I get that, I understand that.
Everyone is going through the same tough times, and it brings tears to my eyes every week when I see a mother with 4 kids in their car, coming here to put food on their table for the week. And us here as a team, everyone work in harmony together, doing this every week after week, I wish I could do more, I always say if I was a millionaire, I would give it all away.
Hi, my name is Angel, and I'm the Digital Project Supervisor at Adventist Information Ministry. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with you today. AIM is the North American Division's contact center. Our representatives interact with people on behalf of media ministries like Amazing Facts, It Is Written, Breath of Life, and 3ABN, outreach initiatives like Your Best Pathway to Health and BibleInfo.com, local churches, and conference-wide projects for evangelism. In this role, we have had the experience of speaking with hundreds of thousands of individuals over the course of over 30 years in service. The theme for this event is Restored, and from a mental, spiritual, and emotional health perspective, we have seen this fact echoed time and time again in our interactions with people. Something is missing. People from all walks of life are drawn in by the saving messages and the gospel of hope that is shared across the division's various initiatives and platforms. Sometimes the appeal is for a free resource for them to read, watch, or listen to. And other times it's simply an offer to pray with someone. The reason for their initial contact varies greatly, but our goal for each interaction remains the same: to connect them with the restoration that is available in Christ and Christ alone. We have the opportunity to speak to people and meet that need in various ways. As the ways that people like to interact have shifted, so has our model for reaching them with the good news and connecting them with needed mental health support. We have seen and continue to see some people who prefer to talk on the phone, while others now prefer to engage more anonymously through a digital channel like web chat, text message, social media, or a web form. Several initiatives that AIM is proud to support, such as gorgeoustogod.org, aruggedjourney.org, apictureofgod.com, I Believe Bible, and others, have had tremendous success reaching people in the digital space. This offers the feeling of safety and is often a less intimidating first step for young people who exist natively in this space, as well as anyone struggling with anxiety, depression, and those feeling embarrassed or ashamed of where they're at in their journey. We have seen these initially small interactions blossom into a thriving conversation and a relationship in which people truly open up about what they're going through. Thanks to the support we provide at AIM, they are able to take the first steps towards healing from trauma, connecting with a community, and understanding more about the hope that we have through our faith in God. The first steps towards restoration. Sometimes conversations that start out as someone sharing a prayer request end up with them pouring their heart out to our representatives over the phone. They may share that they have suffered from depression, have had a lifetime of suicidal ideation, or have experienced such severe and unimaginable trauma that they're struggling to make it through their day-to-day activities. Mental health and wellness are so closely intertwined with emotional and spiritual well-being that it's often difficult to truly separate the two. So while AIM's primary function is not mental health support, we can be that first touch, that lifeline, late at night or early in the morning, on the holidays, all the times that people feel the most alone. We provide a safe space for people to talk about the things that they're struggling with, and we share the love and hope found in the Bible. AIM is not staffed by mental health professionals. We're not a crisis hotline service. The representatives responding to these interactions have been called to serve as a listening ear, as a spiritual mentor, by walking with people and meeting them where they're at in their journey towards knowing and loving God. They are students, they are community members, and they are human. We provide guidance, training, and thorough resources so that they're well equipped to help people who reach out. But these are hard conversations. We are so thankful to be located on the campus of Andrews University and be able to partner with the university in its endeavors to promote and support the mental health of its community members. The Counseling Center on campus provides mental health support and free counseling sessions to all of our student employees. We also have a thorough process of debriefing after tough calls and regular calendar of one-on-one meetings with leaders from our care team so that customer service representatives and digital evangelism team members are supported and given the space to process the hard conversations that they have, returning to the phone or computer restored themselves and ready to be there for the next person who reaches out. Every call, every DM, every text, every email or web form that gets submitted represents a person taking that first step, being courageous and hopeful for a better tomorrow. We are the people on the other side of the computer, the other end of the phone line. We actively listen for and capitalize on opportunities to connect people with needed mental health support, whether that is a referral to a 24/7 suicide hotline, the domestic violence hotline, helping people find a Christian counselor near them, or helping them join a local faith community that can support them in more tangible ways with things like food, shelter, transportation, and medical care. We often find that mental health issues are experienced by people who are simultaneously unwell, either emotionally, physically, or spiritually. Supporting people on their road to finding restoration in Christ requires a whole person approach. AIM is blessed and entrusted with the opportunity to listen to, pray with, and connect people with needed resources to support them on their journey to wellness. We are not the destination, we are a step in the journey. And we are proud to be able to support you as you help the members of your local communities and act in your own spheres of influence, sharing hope, love, compassion, and restoring people to a whole person wellness.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I am inspired by what we have just heard. There are so many resources available and already accessible. We have Dr. Park and Angel with us live now. We're going to have some opportunities to address some questions to them. And so put your comments, put your questions in the chat. We're watching those as well. I want to go to Dr. Park first. And thank you so much for the leadership that you have been really leading and in bringing our faith communities and our healthcare systems together. I know that is a great passion of yours. So can you just tell us, lay a foundation for us? Why do you think, or what do you think is the value of a church working with a hospital or a healthcare system?
Thank you, Dr. Brower. I think when we work together with each other, the result is always greater. And so when you have the resources of community coming together with the resources of a church, with the resources of a hospital, and it just multiplies the effect. So I couldn't say enough about building strategy first that helps us all work together.
Mm. And then you gave an amazing example of a small church, just 35 members, who was actually able to make a significant difference in their community. What was it like to interact with that? And how would you say it might be different with maybe a larger congregation?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think it actually doesn't depend so much on whether the congregation is large or small. It has to do with whether there are people who are dedicated to a certain strategy. And that's where I can't emphasize that enough. We can all go out there and sort of throw out something and see if it sticks, but that's different than developing a strategy together. And what this church brings is some very loyal people to this particular commitment. And the other thing I would say too is we have to be careful, because when a church is doing so much, it could, break the backs of the people who are trying to serve. So then that raises questions of how can we all work together to maintain their resilience so that they don't get tired and burned out as they're giving to others.
Mm, absolutely. So keeping that self-care in mind for ourselves as we're caring for others. So having a strategy is an important first step, not a down the road. Well, Angel, you at AIM have developed a sort of a new strategy. You had to switch from providing mostly telephone servicing to now a digital space. Tell us a little bit about that process, why you felt that was important, and how that happened for you. Okay, and Angel, I think we need to get you unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much for the question. AIM has shifted our connection model to incorporate a lot more digital connection options. So in addition to still servicing our phone callers, obviously, there are still lots of people who prefer to connect in that way for various reasons. But we now offer text messaging and live chat and lots of other website-based connection that we didn't previously offer. And it has been a tremendous blessing for lots of reasons. So some resources that we share with people and, referrals to various agencies or hotlines, or helping them find like a counselor near them, all of that takes place a lot easier if you can send someone a link to the information, right? So we make use of that in tandem often with a phone conversation, and it's just a huge blessing for our process.
Okay, and are you noticing that there may be different demographics of people who are accessing these different services and these different modalities?
We are, yeah. It's interesting to see. We do see, a large number of the maybe 60 plus demographic that contact us on the phone on a regular basis. And they are usually open to other methods like texting. We have a large portion of the digital response that actually comes from that demographic as well, which is interesting. And then, of course, a lot of young people who don't pick up the phone are prone to connect with us in digital ways. So they may see a website that's more intriguing to them, and feels like a safer place to reach out.
So, Dr. Park, we're talking about different demographics. The GIS system that you shared with us about really helps us to identify the demographics that are in our communities. And so, by implication, you're saying that that is an important part of that strategy making. So, can you share with us then, if a church is wanting to access that type of a resource, what are some of the expectations that you come forward with, and how that can be a meaningful relationship?
So we have developed this GIS map through our system, and it only addresses the areas within the primary service areas of our hospitals. So if you're in a zip code that's near one of our hospitals, then we would be happy to share this map with anyone who would like to use it. If you're outside that area, we don't yet have the information integrated into the map. We're actually thinking about whether we'll do that, but right now it's in those areas, so mostly Florida and some of the other states where our hospitals are. But there are other ways of finding out what the demographics are in your area, the race, the age, the specific needs, because you can go to any hospital website and the local CHNA will be on it. So if you search CHNA and your local hospital, you will find out what the primary needs are in your area, and that will help you understand the area. But I would say, finally, the best way to do it is to just that a church would start collaborating or connecting with other churches in its area of its same denomination or different, and really pulling together to ask what you can do in relation to the community collaboratively.
Absolutely. And perhaps one of the challenges that many congregations of all denominations face is the fact that we sort of have to migrate into our church community. We may not necessarily live there, but we migrate in once a week or maybe more often. So how can we be more thoughtful? How can we really think about our communities that surrounds our congregation as really, this is a place where my heart, a piece of my heart belongs as well? Can you encourage us in that line?
Yes. I have a phrase that I say, Dr. Brower, I say, strategy first, action second. And so that's where a church, no matter what their age, what their size, how many people live in the local area, would just get together and ask themselves, what do we want to do for what location of people? One could choose a block around the church, a mile around the church, 5 miles. One could choose a variety of different things, just saying, what is our passion? What is God leading us to do? Plan it, ask yourselves how to assess it. And then set out once the strategy is developed and connections are made with local community resources and a local hospital, and work together. It's that exponential effect that is the most prized, in terms of reaching the most people.
Wonderful. And we have a pastor who's with us here on Zoom, and he's made a comment that one of his churches is engaged in an identical community program, caring for community members, and he's just very encouraged by that. So I want to encourage you as well Pastor Oliveira, as you minister and lead your church in that line. Now, Angel, your ministry through AIM, you don't have a building that we can all come to necessarily. You have a workspace, of course, but it's not the same as maybe coming into your space and accessing your resources, because so much of what you do is behind the scenes. And you mentioned in your video, Gorgeous to God, A Rugged Journey, several of those mental health related resources. Can you tell us a little bit more about how those resources are reaching people and what role AIM has specifically there?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again for the question. AIM is proud to support a lot of the connection efforts that are involved in these types of initiatives and outreach projects, basically. So, the different websites that I mentioned in the video, and then also a lot of the media ministries that we've supported for the longest time, Amazing Facts, Breath of Life, everyone's creating content, whether it's video or a website, and that content gets put out. And AIM is really the connection behind the scenes. So we like to encourage anyone that that puts something out there for people to see and advertises a service, or the option to connect with a mentor, or is talking about spiritual wellness, mental health. Anyone who puts out content should have some sort of a reach back option, and that is where AIM comes into play. And so we're proud to be able to stand in that space and act as the connecting agency. So whether that means we are dialoguing with someone about a question that they have surrounding a mental health struggle or a topic that they're dealing with personally, or whether that means, we're at the top of the funnel there on someone's journey, where we're just reaching them as their interest has been piqued by a program that they've seen on television or heard on the radio. And then we can turn that into a dialogue and build a relationship with that person. We like to think of ourselves as, not the destination, but the hub. So people have a lot of different experiences and needs that can be met by a lot of different agencies and departments or the local church for more tangible help and spiritual growth and discipleship as they're on their journey towards knowing and loving God. And we like to be that connection point. So we often see that people who reach out to us in the digital space and on the phone, the value in AIM is really that connection, that we develop relationships that people then call us back, or they chat with us again because they felt so blessed by that relationship, that human connection.
Well, and I want to press on that point a little bit more, because the human connection is so vital, especially when we're talking about ministering to hearts and minds that may be ailing. But let's be honest, we are connected here right now through technology. But I know that there are some people who wish that we were in person. And I know that both of you have shared with us how you are utilizing different aspects of technology to minister and to serve. So tell us from your viewpoint, for both of you, and maybe Angel, we'll start with you, is technology really making a difference? Don't we need that human touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So inserting the human touch into a digital interaction is our bread and butter at AIM. We actively mentor our staff of both student employees, so young people who are very comfortable in that space already, and all of our employees into becoming extremely able to convey empathy and help people feel heard, even through written communication. So for example, a lot of the questions that we get on, like Gorgeous to God or A Rugged Journey, they may come from someone who is reaching out in that space because it feels safer, it feels a little bit less intimidating. Sometimes the human connection, especially if you're sharing something vulnerable, can be too big of a first step. So the ability to connect with someone digitally and then get a really empathetic, thorough, thought out, kind response back, just sharing the love of God with people, and pointing them back to Him as, their guide as they walk along their journey. That's really where we see that the human connection is not lost in digital communication at all. And if anything, it opens a door, I think, that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak with this person otherwise, because they may never have felt comfortable to reach out one-on-one or, face-to-face to ask their hard questions.
All right, and Dr. Park, what are your thoughts? Technology. You have been a clinician as well, and you know the value of human touch. But tell us, what are your thoughts about this technology?
So I am so appreciative of the thoughts that were just shared. This is a difficult one because we are in a world where technology has overtaken almost everything. But at the end of the day, we need to be loved. And God is love. And the technology will never take the place of walking across the street and loving a neighbor. It simply won't. And so what we need to ask ourselves is, how can we make sure that technology is in the service of flesh and blood, rather than the other way around? And thank goodness for those who spend their lives in technology so we can have resources. But at the end of the day, God is calling us to help to love other people in the reality and the grit of life. And that means stepping out and stepping in where people live.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've talked quite a bit about having safe communities, safe churches. And if people can find that we are safe even in a technological space, then maybe they will come and visit us to help and hopefully find that we are safe in that very human space as well. And that is really one of our goals, is to connect human to human and human to God. Thank you both so much for being with us today and for the work that you are doing to minister hope and wholeness. We're going to go now to our next two presenters. Fire and EMS Chief Corey Smedley joined the City of Alexandria in 2015 as the Deputy Fire Chief of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. He was responsible for improving community preparedness and resiliency. In this position, he worked with local and regional partners to update the Emergency Operations Plan and led the launch of the city's new Emergency Operations Center, which was first activated in May 2019. Chief Smedley earned the Certified Public Manager credential from the George Washington University, and he received the Certified Emergency Manager designation. He holds a bachelor's in communications from the University of the District of Columbia and a master's degree in organizational management from Johns Hopkins University. Chief Smedley is dedicated to the community and supports professional growth within every organization he serves. And he had an opportunity to sit down with our Director of Adventist Community Services in sharing with us. Our final presenter is Dr. Ricardo White. He is an experienced medical director with a demonstrated history of almost 20 years in the healthcare industry. He is skilled in healthcare consulting, case management, prevention, addiction medicine, and healthcare information technology, and is the founder of the Mastermind Institute. Since 2017, he has served as the Section Chief of Psychiatry at the Community Hospital of San Bernardino, a Dignity Health hospital. Prior to this, he was the medical director of both the Chemical Dependency Unit and Outpatient Psychiatry at the Behavioral Health Institute of Loma Linda University Health. As a distinguished thought leader and subject expert, Dr. White launched blacktherapy.com to start a campaign for the healing of the Black community in response to the recent racial tensions. And he is now serving as chair of the North American Division's Mental Health Task Force, working with the Health Ministries Department. And please put your questions in the chat. We will have a conversation with Chief Smedley and Dr. White.
To be effective within communities requires one to form relationships which create trust. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has been supporting communities through Adventist Community Services for the past 50 years. The need for these relationships is highlighted during crisis events, when community leaders and public safety look for partners they can trust to assist in recovery efforts. Currently, we have formed a strong relationship with the Alexandria Fire Department, and recently I had a chance to sit down with Chief Smedley to hear about the advantages of the affiliation of Adventist Community Services. Let's take a look. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, where we are right now, and what happened back in 2000, I think it was 18, here in Alexandria, Virginia?
Yes, my name is Corey Smedley. I'm the fire chief of the City of Alexandria. The City of Alexandria is right within the National Capital Region. We're separated from Washington, D.C. by the Potomac River. We're right now in our state-of-the-art Emergency Operations Center. This came into existence back in 2017, 2018 is our first activation at the Emergency Operations Center, and this was not in place back when we had the congressional shooting where we saw the fact that 7 people were shot.
Okay, now you mentioned that the Operations Center was not in place. At that time, you had not heard of Adventist Community Services, one of the organizations that does emotional and spiritual care, mental health. Since that time, we have reached out to each other, I guess, and had communication. How helpful is that to a department like yours here in Alexandria?
Funny you should say that. Adventist Community Service is very helpful. It's part of the volunteer organizations Active in Disasters, VOAD, and I can tell you with a situation like the congressional shooting, resources are quickly absorbed, and you have to make sure that you have different partners that can help fill those gaps and take care of certain things that you may not have the expertise to handle. So it's very helpful. We have engaged each other, understand each other's way that we operate, understand our assets and liabilities, and be able to quickly emerge to help each other in the time of an emergency.
Let me ask you, piggybacking off of what you just said, if we were to reach out during a crisis event, and that's the first time that you had opportunity to hear about us, how would you respond to something like that?
If we don't know you, it's a vetting process that we will be concerned about. Also, what your capabilities, and if we can trust you to do what you say you can do. So it's very critical that we build those relationships before the emergency. But we do have a kind of a bridge or conduit for what we call spontaneous volunteers through Volunteer Alexandria. We would rather have trained volunteers like an organization like Adventist Community Services, but we would use you in the space of what the need of is for that event. So for example, during the congressional shooting, there was different things that we needed. Feeding. We needed a place to get refuge for not only our first responders, but family members or loved ones who had family members impacted by the shooting directly. And just a location for us to be able to address their concerns and be away from the situation while we're dealing with the emergency.
Now, I know we've had conversations previously, and you mentioned something about some type of center that you all were looking into setting up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We call it the FACT, Family Assistance Center. So a Family Assistance Center, you have to find somewhere to bring people that are concerned about what's going on in in their neighborhoods, as well as concern about their loved ones that may be impacted by that emergency. And you can't do that on ground zero where the emergency is while you're trying to address the emergency. So that FACT Center or Family Assistance Center is a location where you have certain subject matter experts, whether it's Adventist Community Services, the Red Cross, FEMA, Health Department, etc., that can take in the community, give them information, provide them some shelter, and get them the tools and the assistance they need to not only understand what things they need to happen for them, but also what's happening to their family members.
Okay, appreciate that. Let me ask, before we go, is there anything you'd want to tell to individuals that are viewing this? We've got doctors, nurses, attorneys, a number of different experts in their areas of employment that'll be viewing this. What would you say to them? Many of them will affiliate themselves with Adventist Community Services, but they may join up with other help organizations as well. What would be your advice to them, person of your ilk, a fire chief in a major metropolitan department? What would your advice be to them as to what they can do to be a resource to their community?
One, you matter. You can make a difference, and whatever skill set you have, it can be utilized during an emergency. Please get involved. Contact your local emergency management office, wherever that is in your jurisdiction. Whether if you don't have a local, you can contact the state. You can contact an organization like Volunteer Alexandria or whatever the volunteer organization is within your region, so that you can get involved and understand the needs of your community, and they can understand what you bring to the table to help during an emergency. We all matter, we all can help each other, and we all have a vested interest in our community.
All right, appreciate that. And I guess I would like to throw in there, we would encourage them to get with Adventist Community Services and help us help you. So thank you, Chief Smedley. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Ricardo White, proud chairperson of the Mental Health Task Force of the North American Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I am so excited to share with you the product of our collaboration with an awesome team of really awesome people, but under the leadership of our mental health, actually our health ministry director, none other than Dr. Angie Brower. It has been such a pleasure to collaborate with her, and those of you that have worked with her know that she is a powerful force in really and truly getting things done. So Dr. Brower, I look forward to us creating some things that will be an amazing impact in this area of mental health and beyond. So let's talk about our vision for this discussion and this short time that we're going to have together. We are going to discuss what we view as the problem facing mental health today. But rather than just obsessing and over dissecting the problem, we are going to shift very quickly over to what is the solution that we're proposing to address this problem. So a little context on me is I am an addiction psychiatrist. I did my undergrad at Atlantic Union College, where I studied biochemistry. I then did my medical school training at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. I did my psychiatry training in adult and adolescent psychiatry at Loma Linda University. And I did my addiction psychiatry residency at UCLA. Now, besides that, I was the medical director of the chemical dependency unit of the Behavioral Medicine Center at Loma Linda University. And I've also functioned as a head elder at Mount Rubidoux. And I say that to say that I have seen intimately what it's like for a practitioner to be discharging a patient and have very limited resources to offer. But I've then also been a community stakeholder and seen the challenges that it can take as you're trying to discharge a person. So I'm currently the section chief of psychiatric services at one of the community hospitals here in Southern California. And let me tell you, there are times you can feel like your hands are really tied when it's time to connect patients, especially in challenging situations, to resources that are meaningfully impactful. And so it is from that vantage point that I've been so excited to strategize on the mental health task force to develop, products or organize the product portfolio in such a way that it becomes so much more impactful to community stakeholders, like whether it's hospitals or churches or what have you. So let's talk about the problem. The problem is that we as humans can put on a game face when in fact we don't feel like the game is going very well at all. We might even feel like the game is over. So we're really good at projecting facades. I remember in undergrad in a class called quantitative analysis, one of the techniques we learned for identifying a compound was to identify its melting point, okay? So basically every product, number of compounds, they have a melting point, and when there's no other way to identify them, just figure out the melting point. Oh, that's the product, that's the compound. And it's interesting that we as humans, we have a melting point, and it doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. And the Center for Disease Control from roughly about 1999 to about 2016 did a study looking at the suicide rate across the United States. And what they found was, on average, there was actually a 30% increase in suicide over that time frame. But look at how the data breaks down. So true, a tragic 48,000 Americans succumbed to suicide, lost their lives to suicide on an annual basis. But during that year, 1.2 million people in America are actually have actually attempted suicide. And then 3.2 million people are actually planning suicide, but then 12.2 million have thoughts about suicide. Of the 48,000 that suicided, it's astounding to realize that 54% do not have a known psychiatric diagnosis. So just to cement the reality that this problem is so pervasive. If you were walking and you came upon some blood on a floor, you would assume that blood was contaminated until proven otherwise. And that is because of the power of the marketing of the idea that we need to have universal precautions as we think about blood, because we should consider it contaminated until proven otherwise. Well, it's interesting that we don't view humans in that context. And what if we really started to be sensitive to the vulnerable nature of the, though powerful, but very human spirit? What if we recognized how vulnerable it actually is? So what is actually the solution? Well, in the biblical Old Testament book of Daniel, we encounter a story in which 3 Hebrew boys challenge a king who tries to force them to go against what they believe. And rather than succumbing to this king's pressure, they prepare to pay the ultimate price. and they're actually thrown into a fiery furnace that the heat of which kills the people who threw them in. So they now end up on fire in this furnace, but not consumed. And so as we're dealing with this issue of overwhelm, the problem is not being on fire. The problem is not having passion. The goal is having passion, but not being consumed. So one of the first things we did as a group thinking about this issue was we considered our ideal client's success path. And what you see is we thought about where a person would start out, and that is feeling overwhelmed, sort of having the gorilla, the 400-pound gorilla on your back. And so we thought to ourselves, well, what would be the interventions that would help them break free and actually feel victorious and able to continue on the journey, impassioned, on fire, but not consumed. So one of the first things we thought about was optimizing resource integration. So there is no shortage of resources that have been created by some very hard-working people that are making a meaningful impact, and we must salute that, we must acknowledge that. And in honor of that, those folk made those resources to be as impactful as possible. And so the goal is, what if there was a way to promote integration that would increase the availability of these resources? The hard work that they've done is deserving of that, And so that's one of our goals, is how do we make sure that those resources are as accessible as possible? One thing we talked about was a problem-based web setup. So currently, this is the beautiful appearance of our website, and you can see those hexagonal shapes underscoring the mindset of a desire for integration. And so the goal is, what if things were a bit more problem-based? Because while people who are having a problem, while they are super clear on the problem, a lot of times they're not so clear on what is the solution. And so what if it was a more problem-based approach so that people who landed on the website would know immediately where it is that they need to go? That's one thought, and that's one strategy and campaign that we will be looking at. But the other thing is, imagine a dynamic survey. So imagine if you could be surveyed, and that survey would actually help to populate your queue so that you could then understand, hey, what are the resources being offered by the NAD Mental Health Task Force? What's being offered that is relevant to my problem? So imagine a survey that would then populate you with relevant resources. But not just that. Imagine if that tool would actually also notify the resource that you exist and that you're looking for this solution. So it would be this bilateral system that would promote bringing together the user, the person who needs the resource with the resource itself. These were some of the things that we talked about. But then we also thought to ourselves, how could we impact constituents in a more meaningful way? How could we really touch them and impact them? And not just that, what if there was something that would impact them even more meaningfully, but also leverage the expertise in a scalable fashion, okay? So now here you have this person who has a skill set. They don't have to feel necessarily overwhelmed. They can take that skill they have and they can leverage it so that it can actually impact more people. What if that was possible? But then what if, in addition to that, you could actually have this intervention impact more upstream, So I talked to you before about this situation in which you have, 48,000 people suiciding. It's really tragic. And look at the numbers though. you actually have 12.2 million people who are thinking about suiciding. And I'm sure the number would be even larger if we looked at pre-suicide and just people feeling overwhelmed. Can you imagine that number? Well, imagine an intervention that actually can be deployed more upstream and more impactful to an even larger segment, so that maybe people don't even get to these more downstream conditions in the first place. Coming in 2023, I want to proudly introduce our initiatives of the not consumed burnout groups that we want to deploy throughout the North American division. It's our goal to have 12-step groups that support mental resilience. 12-step groups that support mental resilience. The 12-step model has just been absolutely amazing as a resource to complement the clinical setting. And it is our goal to have support groups that are going to support resilience. So the question you may then ask yourself, well, what would be the intellectual property that would drive the effectiveness of these groups? So the intellectual property is based on the following. I want to show you a slide. It's busy, but I'm going to walk you through it. So first of all, you have this human function curve, and on the y-axis, you'll see performance. You're going to see performance. And then on the x-axis, you see arousal stress. So often when we say stress, you often think of distress, but actually there are two forms of stress. There is distress, but there's actually good stress, eustress. And so with some arousal stress, you can actually get an improvement in performance. But with more and more stress, it will get to the point where it stops improving human performance, and it will actually start to go into that distress area. And now you see exhaustion, ill health, and actual breakdown and or burnout. There's another way to think about this, and that is that the brain is in a tug of war between being pulled towards distress or being pulled towards eustress. Because you see, eustress is really important. It's really important to understand that not doing anything, not being on fire, is a condition the brain really doesn't like. It enjoys being challenged. You have 100 billion neurons, not for them to just do nothing. They want to do something. And some of doing something is eustress. It's good stress. Well, rather than you fighting alone to pull it over into the eustress zone, what if you could get some support? What if you could get some help to pull it from distress over into eustress? So one of the things we at the Mastermind Institute have pioneered is this idea of vital connections for thriving. And so we've identified 7. They are spirituality, relationships, resource management, time management, health, which we break down into mental and physical, purpose. We talk about 3 dimensions of your purpose. And then we talk about rest, the power and the importance of rest. And so we feel that those are vital things that humans are connected to. And so in a person's thinking, it's our belief that it is critical to proportion the thinking amongst those 7 vital areas, and failure to devote sufficient thought and strategizing in those areas will make a person at risk for breakdown. So what we are very interested in is processes that help the brain to proportion itself amongst those vital areas. You'll see that we depict the brain as a diamond, helping to cement this idea that your brain is the most valuable thing that you have, and it's designed to help you strategize and solve the problems in your life. And so we get very excited about tools that will help a person proportion their thinking and their strategizing in those vital areas. So imagine not consumed year-long support groups that actually help people develop strategies and support them in developing their personal initiatives to have success in these respective 7 vital areas. So now I want to share with you our minimum viable product launch schedule. So by November of 2022 of this year, we want to have our logo and branding complete for the North American division, not consumed groups. We then are going to get a big book completed. That'll be done by yours truly. And then coming in March of 2023, we will have the workbooks that are going to be the drivers of the group. We'll have that completed. And just in time for next year's Health Summit, we will be launching our facilitator training. So if you're wanting to be a facilitator for these burnout groups, that's going to take place. We're going to launch that at next year's Health Summit. And not just that, though, because of our linear focus on preventing burnout, we'll also be developing and launching by that time a facilitator support network, because we don't want our facilitators burning out, of course. And so I mentioned to you the importance of optimizing resource integration. So it is the goal of these burnout groups to be supported and empowered by the numerous resources that we talked about before being offered by the North American Division Health and Mental Health Task Force. And of course, the goal of the burnout groups is to keep in mind that success path that we mentioned, of having people go from overwhelmed and having no tools to being skilled and growing in mastery. So let me just summarize by reminding you that it is our belief that even when this is the internal experience, we are amazing at being able to hide that. And the suicide statistics show that this issue of burnout is a huge issue. And we get excited about targeting upstream strategies upstream, where we can actually impact a larger number of people and perhaps help it not get to suicide and those other downstream conditions much less likely. And so we keep a linear focus on the success path and looking at what are strategies that will move people along the success path of going and feeling from overwhelmed to actually feeling victorious, able, and on fire, but not consumed. And so we talked about the success path that we're looking at, that we want the burnout groups to move people along. We've talked about our passion and commitment to optimize resource integration, set the website up in a more problem-based organization, launching this dynamic survey to enhance matching those interested in the resources with the people offering the resources. And then we talked about, streamlining those services and magnifying their cohesiveness so that they are utilized even more and in an even more meaningful way. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have at this time. Thank you for your attention.
And we have Dr. White and Chief Smedley with us now to address some of your questions. So by the way, we have been talking here about crisis. This is what we are addressing in this segment of our discussion today. Is we know that crisis situations arise, and unfortunately, we have been living in a crisis situation for a couple of years now, haven't we? I want to go to Chief Smedley. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Chief Smedley, you mentioned the process that you underwent in response to a crisis situation where you brought together community partners. And it must have been quite a task to respond to a situation as it was unfolding. But that's what you do. You are a trained professional in doing that. Share with us a little bit about the importance of being prepared for a crisis situation.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. It is really critical to be prepared for a crisis. We in public safety and the fire service and emergency management come up with all kind of plans, and normally those plans are able to address kind of routine situations. You quickly find out that your plans get overwhelmed in a crisis state. And we have definitely seen that through our global pandemic. But there is many things that you prepare for. One thing that sometimes catches you off guard is that the personnel that are prepared to address the emergency or the crisis, now they're in crisis. And how do you are able to accomplish your mission when your troops are the ones that are also impacted? So what I can tell you, what I quickly learned in this space is that Dr. White, I wish we knew about your program previously before this, but I know that one thing that we saw quickly is the mental and behavioral health impact on our first responders. We know it's happening out in the community, but I can tell you it kind of jarred our foundation for our department and many other departments when we're dealing with the crisis with our first responders and their stability and their home work-life balance stability. So we do a lot with our plans. We exercise those plans, and I can't stress enough the partnership that we have to maintain because we need each other to address many situations, because we're dealing with a global pandemic, but the normal things that we deal with didn't go away. We still have to address those things, and quite often we're doing it with less resources, whether they are not in a space to be able to handle the situation, or resources because the economy also was impacted by this situation.
And so it's really important then from your perspective that you also have a volunteer base that is ready to engage at that time of crisis. So you mentioned a volunteer system there in the city of Alexandria. Can we find that in other cities and districts so that anyone can reach out to their leadership where they live and start engaging in those conversations about how can I be prepared to help you?
Absolutely. In the bio, you mentioned the emergency operations plan. In that emergency operations plan, we strategize of various types of situations we may be confronted with that has a propensity of a significant challenge of life safety. And in that, we identify the resources that the government have, and we also identify the resources the government doesn't have. And we look to ensure that we are very aware of our ecosystem, and where there are opportunities where the government doesn't have resources, that we can build those bridges to do that. The city of Alexandria has 160,000 residents. We're only 15.6 square miles. We also have over 80 different congregations in our jurisdiction. So we have a wealth of resources that we have to continuously make sure that we have a relationship with. So the department that is not a governmental agency called Volunteer Alexandria, is that conduit to help us connect with all those nonprofits, faith-based, and other resources that the government doesn't have. And that exists in some state everywhere else, whether that's a Volunteer Alexandria, whether you go to your local emergency management office, and or if that doesn't exist, then you can always go to your state emergency management office that can help.
Thank you so much for sharing those additional valuable resources with us. Dr. White, you can see in the chat there are a lot of very affirming and encouraging remarks about this new program being launched. A lot of excitement about that. How can this program, these not consumed groups, be used in different settings? Doctor's office, church, community center, are they applicable in different settings?
Thank you so much for that question, Erica. This is designed with my headache in mind, you know, and I just thought, man, what would I be looking for if I was sitting about to discharge a patient? What kind of resources would we love to discharge them to? And then, you know, how could this be designed in such a way so that the resources that are there can actually be accessed? So in the vision, a not consumed, you know, burnout group facilitator would be aware of the various resources, so they don't have to feel inhibited and just feeling overwhelmed themselves that there's nothing to offer them. One of the power of 12-step groups is their versatility. So there are going to be specific communities that may want to tailor it more specific to their particular needs. And it's that dynamism that really gets me excited, that they can be sort of more custom tailored to a specific setting, just like what you mentioned. So part of the skill set of that facilitator would be taking a look at, you know, what might be more, what might we need to emphasize with this particular group, and the chemistry that we've created in our group. And so part of the whole point of that facilitator network is providing that support to understand how can the resources be adapted to a specific community. So it's that versatility that makes us really excited about this initiative.
So, Dr. White, you also practice in addiction medicine, and so you're very familiar as another outcome of burnout. And so what you're looking at doing is really addressing a number of downstream issues. Tell us a little bit about, in your practice, what are you seeing? How are you noticing the trajectory that individuals are on right now, given the current crises that we are surrounded with?
Well, there's so much in terms of limitations, as far as, hey, so you've got the acute locked setting where you can go because you're just completely overwhelmed. There's following up with, you know, a therapist, a psychiatrist, you know, and the gambit as far as the practitioners that will affect the person's or help a person with their mental health. And there is going through that process. Now, the limitations are there is such a large segment of people who don't even make it into that kind of a setting. And we all know that there is so much resistance to accepting and pursuing mental health care, especially from that acute standpoint. And we'd love to see that change, by the way. But what if we could get people excited about engaging in an initiative to avoid getting to that space in the first place? The goal is that there is so much stigma associated with downstream efforts with regard to getting mental health care. And that stigma, by the way, it needs to be overcome and work needs to be put into reversing that. But I think the goal of the not consume groups is that might be a barrier we don't even have to necessarily fight, because who doesn't want to strengthen their resilience? Who on this call right now is not in some ways at risk of burnout? Because those of us that are leaders, we are by all means on fire. We have passion, and it puts us at risk for overwhelm. It puts us at risk for overwhelms. But now in this initiative, it doesn't have to be stigmatized. I'm going to my resilience group. I'm going to my resilience group. You have a resilience group? Tell me more about that, because I wish I had a resilience group. So I think this brings to the human experience what positive psychology talks about, what mental health talks about. Like, what if we focused on wellness, and didn't have to just obsess over illness? What if we actually focused on wellness and put energy into optimizing wellness? How excited would that be? That's what this initiative is about.
Well, this is very exciting because we know that there is a great need, and the crisis situation that we all have been living in has emphasized that all the more. In the last just couple minutes, I'd like to ask both of you just one final question. If you had known that this crisis situation that we're in now was going to happen, what would you have done differently? How would you have prepared? And Chief Smedley, maybe we can go to you first.
I might have retired, but it's that balance. In my business, it's a lot of Type A personalities, and they don't normally come forward when there's a challenge. I know there are resources that we have to care for them. I would have made sure that those resources had the flexibility and the capacity to serve our first responders, and sometimes that's where we struggled. We answer every call, and we never miss a call. But what we miss sometimes is the fact that the persons answering those calls need help, and we can't always find the resources to help them. So I would have strengthened spaces like Dr. White is talking about, and I'm definitely going to get his contact information, because I can see that the good news is more people are coming forward in my organization saying that they need help. The challenge is finding the help that they need.
And Dr. White, what are your thoughts? What would you have done differently?
I would have followed the chief's advice and established the connections before you need them. I think that is such of a powerful, point, that it is so important to establish our networks before the crisis, so that, crises ultimately are going to test the durability of the relationships. But oh, how powerful it is to establish these relationships before you need them. Much the way it's a great idea to establish a strong relationship with your psychotherapist, your counselor, psychiatrist, what have you, before the crisis. So thank you guys so much for this opportunity to share.
Dr. White, I thought you were going to say you would have retired as well. Well, I am so glad that both of you are still here working, serving, and keeping people alive. Thank you for what you both are doing. And thank you for also inviting us into partnership to help you keep people whole as well. We really appreciate all that you are doing. So, Eric.
Dr. Brown. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So, Erica, here we are. We are at the end of the plenaries. We are at the end of the educational portion, but we have more to come. But let's take a deep breath and just, what are your thoughts? Where are you now? I know you've had a busy day because you've also been seeing some clients today.
That's true. Everything we've talked about is just so relevant. There's just a lot of pain. There is a lot of suffering out there. There are unexpected situations that arise that people really, they find themselves caught off guard and not knowing what to do. And I just love what Dr. White said, and Chief Smedley, about knowing what's out there before you need it, right? And so starting to encourage people that just because you haven't had a crisis, just because you haven't had some of these things happen before, doesn't mean that it might not necessarily happen. To just kind of have those tools nearby and know what's out there. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are suffering, and I loved this afternoon, there were a lot of comments in the chat about it starts with us. Yes, we are a church community, but we are the church. We as individuals make up that church body, and it starts with each of us making a decision to be more gentle, more kind, and more aware.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that we've heard that the resources are there. We do need to spend some time looking for them, finding them, identifying them, but we certainly want to help you with that process. And so you can go to Erica's website. By the way, Erica is the mastermind behind Gorgeous to God and A Rugged Journey. And the Women's Ministries is actively engaged, as are many of the departments. And of course, Health Ministries is here for you as well. We want to remember, as you said, Erica, that this is not just about the church, but this is also about each one of us being prepared. At any moment, we may be approached for help, or we may notice that someone is in need of help. So what can we do to be ready? Well, that's what Sunday is all about. So please don't miss your training session that is coming up on Sunday. We have a number of announcements that we want to run through very quickly as we wrap up here. And there's so much that is needed to be done, but there has been much that has done. And so let's also remember that we can thank God that He has really been the mastermind behind it all. So the first announcement is to please check your email. For all of our registered attendees, you should be receiving an email with information about the programming for tonight, for tomorrow, and also for Sunday. So please be sure to check your email, check your spam or junk folders as well. If there are any issues, please, the email to reach out to is health@nadadventist.org. Any questions or problems, please reach out to that email address. So tonight, we are going to go into our inspirational segment of our summit. And we're starting with a powerful program on the impact of music on the brain. So you don't want to miss this program featuring Pastor John Bradshaw from It Is Written, Kelly Maurer, Jamie George, and Jennifer LaMountain. Now this program is going to be live stream only, so it will not be accessed on Zoom. You can go to those websites listed on the screen, nadhealth.org/restored or nadhealth.org/Sabbaths for that information. Also, tomorrow is Mental Wellness Sabbath, and we have a special sermon that has been prepared by Pastor Mark Finley that you can take to your church. I know it might be too late today to take it to the church for tomorrow, but you can use it at a future Mental Wellness Sabbath at your local church. But what will happen tomorrow live is an afternoon training on friendship evangelism, and we have Pastor John Renifo will be joining us for that. We also have Dr. Carlos Fayard, who will be talking to us about how to successfully do a mental emphasis Sabbath at our church. You can find that information on our website as well. This will be through Zoom. It will not be live streamed. Now for the Sunday sessions, please, 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 for those of you who are registered, only you can access these sessions. They will not be live streamed. So please check your emails. You do need to accept the ticket to access the class that you have registered for. We begin at 10:15 Eastern with our networking sessions. We're going to have another chat with Dr. White. And then our trainings begin at 11 a.m. Eastern. Remember to pick up your ticket through your email. And then don't miss our closing program at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have a special message from the General Conference to share with you at that time. For those of you who are here for continuing education, pastors and educators, you will receive information on how to access that through the Adventist Learning Community. And for any of the health providers, Loma Linda University has a special process to obtain those units, so you should have already received an email with information on how to access that. And part of the continuing education process is to complete the evaluation. So take out your phones right now, scan that QR code where you will be taken to directly to the survey for today. There was a separate survey for yesterday. These surveys will be open for about a week, and so we'll email them out to you as well, but make sure you complete your surveys as well. Recordings of all of the sessions, most of them are already available through Zoom for our registered attendees. We will post them in the future on the Adventist Learning Community, and of course, we will let you know about that. But Erica, that's all we have for now, and I think it has been an absolute joy and pleasure to be with you, to be here, and to be with each one of you as well. We hope that you have been blessed. We hope that you have gained some valuable knowledge as well as some inspiration. And remember, we're on this journey together. We hope you continue and stay with us. And Erica, would you have a closing prayer for us?
I'd be happy to. Heavenly Father, we close out this day grateful and full of hope for a new day and a new chapter. We've talked about pain and suffering and trauma and crisis. And Father, you have been walking through these fires alongside of us. We thank you for this opportunity to meet together, to discuss these important challenges, and for the way that you have guided us to find solutions for hope and for healing for your children. We pray now that you will be with us as we go into these evening hours, that we will find rest and be restored because we have spent time with you. In Jesus' name, amen.